Welcome to Admissions Live, the weekly web show for college and university admission professionals. We broadcast on the Higheredlive network, a product of EDUniverse Media. Tune on to Admissions Live on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern on higheredlive.com and join in the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag AdmissionsLive hashtag. I am your guest host, Gil Rogers, and tonight I'm going to be joined by my co-guest host, Beth Wolfe from Marshall University, who'll be joining us in a second. And we're going to be chatting about admissions solutions or tackling admissions problems. But we can't do that without first giving a shout out to some of our sponsors that make Admissions Live possible. Admissions Live is sponsored by Welcome to College, where college visits are made simple. The mission at Welcome to College is to help students find colleges where they will flourish. The team at Welcome to College believes it's all in the visit and have created free web and mobile applications to plan, rate, share, and compare the entire college visit process. Parents and high school counselors can also create an account to share their impressions. Check out Welcome to College today. Admissions Live is also sponsored by my company, Zinch. Zinch is hosting a great webinar by our international team focused on effectively measuring your international recruitment ROI this Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Webinars are free and open to your entire admissions team. Email outreach@zinch.com, tweet @socialadmission, or visit zinch.com/webinars to sign up. So just to give a quick background, I'm Gil Rogers. I'm a former admissions officer, and I currently work at Zinch. Today, I'm not really representing Zinch. I'm more so representing my prior role and also just an onlooker in the industry. But I want to take a second to introduce Beth Wolfe, who is my co-host for this evening, and she's the director of recruitment at Marshall University. But Beth, if you want to take a second to introduce yourself before we get started, that'd be great.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here tonight. I am Beth Wolfe, Director of Recruitment at Marshall University, my alma mater. We're located in West Virginia with campuses in Huntington and South Charleston. My education career actually started in secondary education. I was an English and chemistry teacher for 8 years before I moved into higher ed. Spent about 2.5 years as the coordinator of STEM outreach at Marshall University before I moved into the position of Director of Recruitment. And I'm currently working on my EDD in higher ed leadership, and I'm about one hoop jump away from being in the dissertation stage. So any good thoughts, vibes, anything like that to help me along would be appreciated.
Awesome. So real quickly, just to kind of lay the foundation for our conversation, this all started a couple of weeks ago, when a news article came out on Inside Higher Ed about an admissions officer being let go because of some comments that she had made on her Facebook page that had made its way onto a college search website. And things like the admissions problems, Tumblr account, Twitter account, Facebook page that are out there that many people find amusing. I mean, I'm one of them that gets a laugh out of going on and just reliving some of those experiences. But even movies about the admission process that are coming out soon. So just before we tackle some of the real admissions problems, can you maybe share a little bit about your experiences with the admissions problems hashtag with Twitter, Tumblr, and that content that you found?
Sure. I'll admit I find the admissions problems Tumblr wildly entertaining. It will literally make me laugh out loud in my office. People walking by probably think I'm crazy. And as soon as I learned about it, I sent it to my staff and I said, if you guys don't know about this, you have to go check it out right now. It is hilarious. I often trade favorite posts during staff meetings. Hey, did you guys see this one? Some of my staff members have been retweeted by admissions problems, but it does bring up the question of what's appropriate to share online, and especially within your persona that is associated with your college or university. We have kind of a rule in our office about people's online presence, and that really they do need to use their judgment about what's work appropriate, and many of my staff members do have two separate Facebook profiles, one that's private to share with their friends, and then one that's public that they will use to post on our university pages and answer student questions and things like that. But the UPenn situation is not the only one that's been in the news recently about people being fired or asked to resign, or even having criminal charges brought against them because of things that they're posting online. There was a man that posted a YouTube video of him driving through Chick-fil-A and giving the worker a hard time. He got fired from his job because his company didn't think that that was representative of the type of people they wanted working for them. Just yesterday, the son of the Fire Department of New York's commissioner resigned from the New York EMS squad because of tweets that he had posted that were racist and offensive. And so, you can do a quick search through the news to see that things that people are posting can definitely cost them, a lot of credibility, if not their jobs, if not their freedom, if we look at the Steubenville, Ohio case as well.
Great, that's some really good background. So that'll really serve as the foundation for this conversation. Just as a reminder to guests who are watching online right now, please feel free to tweet at us using the Admissions Live hashtag. We're also monitoring the Admissions Probs hashtag for any great insights that we might be able to see during the show. And we're also hoping that the Admissions Prob Twitter account will join us in the conversation as we're talking about them. So we hope that they decide to get involved. So let's talk a little bit about online identity. What's good, what's not good. I know from my personal experience, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm very active on Facebook, very active on Twitter, somewhat on Instagram. I used to, try to be on every network, every channel. I was when Google Plus came out, I was one of those people that said, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to be awesome. And then it was like Facebook without my friends. So talk a little bit about online identity and what maybe some thoughts you have on what's good, what's not good, and some things you might be able to share there.
Sure. Obviously, I think we could spend an entire hour or two talking just about online identity, and especially when you're affiliated with a college or university. And we can also get into a whole debate too about freedom of speech, and especially for state-supported schools, do they have the right to monitor, limit things that people are posting online? But I think just from a personal standpoint and as a professional, I think it's really important that we keep in mind that it's way too easy to post first and think second, or that we only think about the most immediate consequence. And we often forget that we can delete it, but that doesn't mean that somebody else hasn't done a screenshot, hasn't copied it, hasn't shared it, hasn't forwarded it, and that anything that we send online can be passed very quickly, and then has a life of its own. And so where we might misspeak or have a bad day at maybe a college fair or on a phone call, that can kind of fade with people's memory. But things that are posted online, the delete button doesn't just live on your computer.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that it's almost too easy to post your thoughts online and post before you think. It'd almost be nice if there was some kind of like button that said, are you sure you want to post after you say something negative, like it could read your mind. But so really moving on into admissions problems. So this is the reason why we're on this call. And there's lots of people interested in this topic. And my position is that you can't make any changes unless you decide to talk about the problems. So what we're gonna do for really the rest of our chat today is talk about some of the main highlights that we've seen recently on the admissions problems Tumblr, and talk about maybe ways we can make some adjustments there. So the first is the high school visit. I know as a former admissions counselor that it's both the blessing and the curse of the job, I guess, would be a nice way to put it. There's always the great times where you see students that are very interested in your school and you make a real impact in their decision to enroll. And then there are times that maybe the guidance counselor forgot you were coming. There are the students that are there, they might just be there to get out of class. Think about any way that a student that an experience could go poorly. They've probably talked about it on the admissions problems Tumblr. So just to kind of give you a little bit of something to maybe think about here, Zinch actually did a research study on guidance counselors and issues that they face, and one of the areas focused on on the high school visits and how they are perceived. And across the board, for the most part, the many guidance counselors, rather, in response to our survey, said that they did find them valuable, but they think they could be better. Mainly thinking about things like making them more of a resource than necessarily just a sales pitch. So I'd be interested to see your thoughts on high school visits and maybe some experiences you've had, and then also ways that we might think about making them more beneficial so that they're not so dreaded as part of a everyday life during the fall.
Sure. Well, I think that high school visits, as you said, can be a blessing and a curse, and they're in some respects they're just a necessary evil. Not that they're evil, but they're necessary for what we're doing. And yet we're both sides of the visit are feeling a lot of pressures. And I know, at least in the state of West Virginia, there's a lot of attention being paid to instructional time. And so anytime we call the school, they're definitely looking at that issue of instructional time. And so we've had schools tell us that they will only schedule school visits during weeks that are a full week of school. So if there's a holiday, if there's a snow day, anything that takes a day out of the week, then they're not going to schedule a visit that week. So that can be very difficult when we're trying to, I have a single counselor trying to work with 15 different schools, and they're all kind of putting these limits on there. But I think that it's important to take a look at what's working and what isn't, and quit doing the things that aren't working. And for us, one of those things were schools that only offered lunch visits. So one thing that the state of West Virginia, I think, does very well is we have this very organized and thought out and well-planned college fair tour every fall. So every high school in the state participates in the West Virginia College Fair Tour. And so we see all of those students, at least the juniors and seniors, and are able to get our literature in their hands and have them fill out an information card. So for a school to only offer us a lunch visit, it really is no more beneficial than, actually it's less beneficial than the college fair, because we all know that at lunchtime, the students want to eat their lunch and chat and socialize and have time to just kind of hang out, and they're really not interested in talking to any of us. So we got to a point in my office where we just said, if they will only give you a lunch visit, you don't have to go. You're not going to get anything more, and it's not really worth our time. And yesterday, when we were talking kind of in prep for the show, just an idea kind of popped in my head is that we can be more proactive with scheduling, because every counselor has had that situation where they schedule it, they send a reminder, they call the day ahead, and then they get there and the counselor says, oh, I'm sorry, this is a teacher in-service day and none of the kids are here. Well, most of these things are going to be on the school calendar that they put out at the beginning of the year. So, if the counselors would just go and pull those calendars and see, what the school calendar looks like for the year, and at least start with suggesting dates that look like they would be better for the school, maybe we can avoid some of those bad scheduling problems.
I can't agree with that more. I think, thinking about, there have been times where I've gotten to a school and the school was closed. And it was for no other reason than it was a testing day, or it was something that was going on, and they didn't call me, and I'd driven 2 hours to get there, and called my boss and I said, I'm not rescheduling this school because there's really no reason to. They forgot I was coming. And it's about, being, like you said, proactive. And the reality is, and if you think about it, one of the results of our findings with counselors was that one of their biggest headaches is lack of time, just like anybody else. I mean, if you think about the job of a high school guidance counselor at a lot of schools, they're not just college counseling planners, they're course schedulers, they're conflict resolution experts, they're class advisors, they're doing all of these things. So, I mean, the respect goes both ways, obviously, and part of that is understanding that they're very busy too. And when you're trying to visit 100 or so schools or whatever it is during your fall travel season, they're getting calls from 300 schools trying to look for that same date and time. And they are probably just plugging you in because they think you're doing you a favor, but then they're not looking at the calendar for the rest of the school year and putting those two and two together, just because they're so busy and they're worrying about 500 million other things. So being proactive in your planning of your travel and looking at the school's calendar, especially if it's a school you really want to get in, that's very important to you because of your applicant list or what have you. is something that's important. So that's a very good point. Hopefully there's some good hashtag admissions solutions for our hashtag admissions problems.
I hope so. I was just going to say real quick, feeding off of what your survey of the counselors found, with them saying they wish it was more of a resource than a sales pitch. One of the topics that comes up a lot on admission problems and also in my office is the questions that students ask that are let's say less than informed, and that really don't serve them a very much of a purpose in terms of their college search. And again, like you said, college counseling is probably the least of high school counselors' jobs. And so if we could, say, I'm going to come and I'll do a session just about how to search for a college and what kind of questions should you ask and what kind of things could you consider. That's going to benefit the students, it's going to benefit the counselor, and then that's going to have the byproduct effect of benefiting your school because, hey, you came and did something just to help them out. And that's going to be, a great PR move, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, thinking about why, and we'll get into this with other questions, but thinking about why ultimately people stay in the admissions field, hopefully it's for the students, and putting students first in what you do. And I know that's why I do what I do every day is to help students through their educational journey. So going to a high school guidance office and providing a workshop on financial aid or providing an essay writing workshop or instant decision days or whatever they are is going to be a great way to build relationships. And just to bring up a tweet from the Twitter stream, Fuji actually posted to us that the best high school visits that he has been involved with evolved for him into chats with good counselor friends. That you can spend a lot of time at a high school visit just building a strong relationship with a guidance counselor, and even if you don't meet with students, as long as you take the time to have a good relationship with the counselor at that school, you're going to see some value out of your time. It's not always about the number of inquiry cards that you walk away with from a visit. It's about building that relationship too. That's my opinion. I don't know if you agree.
I totally agree.
Awesome. So great, a lot of great content on that portion of the topic. I think this one came up kind of midstream as we were talking, and this was actually one of the tweets that was on the hashtag admissions probs. And the tweet goes, it's from Kate M. She's smart not to list her last name. Is fire alarm went off, and our director was more concerned with the freshman admission packets than her own staff. So I guess the admissions problem that we're kind of tackling here is the my boss doesn't care about me mindset, or the institution doesn't care about me mindset that an admissions officer might feel at the height of travel season or at the height of reading season when pressures are their highest. So maybe if we could talk about, because you are a boss, is how is the pressures that are there, and then also handling those situations and with that respect.
Sure. Obviously when I saw that tweet, I thought, ouch, that hurts. Hopefully that director's concern was over the fact that the packets are not self-ambulatory, and her staff members were. But I think that's probably to Kate just a symptom of probably a more overall approach and feeling that they get in the office. And I think that should be convicting of directors and deans and and people in those management positions of, does my staff feel like I am concerned about them? And it can be tough, just speaking from personal experience, trying to juggle everything that I need to do in the day. And often I have great intentions of giving a shout out to my staff or letting them know, but I do try to do things even if they're kind of sporadic. I do have a annual tradition at Christmas. There's a week of treats from Beth, and every day I bring in cookies and homemade things that I spend the night before putting together for them. I'm sure they would like for that to be a little bit more frequent throughout the year, but that is just kind of my way each year of just saying, I really do appreciate what you guys do for the team and for the institution and to make us all look better.
And I mean, I would say that, bad bosses are not exclusive to college admissions. Okay. And that's where I think that a lot of the posts that are on like admissions problems, Tumblr, bashing the boss, bashing the director or the president, every industry, whether you work at Walmart, college admissions, or a Fortune 500 company, you're going to have there are going to be bosses that aren't the most emotionally intelligent folks that don't necessarily handle situations well. So you do have to have a line between, is it the person not being able to handle situations and resources well, or is it the admissions industry? I would say a lot of times it's a person thing, not an industry wide thing. And so, yeah, I would say that's, I mean, we could spend the entire hour talking about people fielding complaints and issues and that have to do with their boss. But the reality is, again, that that boss issues are every industry thing, not just an admissions thing.
Definitely, and not just admissions on the higher ed campuses as well. I'm sure there are other offices that have those same sentiments as well.
Awesome. So going back to kind of the high school visit issue, but there's a whole segment of the job with admissions that has to do with traveling. And I know, being a former supervisor of admissions counselors, always a topic of conversation is wasting time traveling, whether it's going to a college fair and feeling like you're wasting your time talking to students who aren't informed, or not talking to anybody at all if it's a poorly attended fair. So maybe share some thoughts about travel and the time and impact and priority with respect to the job.
Sure. I think it's important for managers to look for information. So we always ask our staff to give us feedback after every fair about how well attended it was, and not just how well attended, but then what was the level of interest, because there are also those fairs where there are hundreds of kids and none of them come to your table, and so you kind of feel like the loser in the corner at the middle school dance that nobody wants to approach. And so those are no fun either. So we do ask them for some feedback about the attendance, the traffic at their table, and some feedback on that. And we do use that in terms of our planning. I think it's also important to share that there are sometimes that we go to events that we as directors know aren't going to be all that great, but we are going for more of a PR standpoint. So it's kind of one of those things that, yeah, we know it's not going to be awesome, but if we're not there, somebody's going to notice that we're not there, and they're not going to call me, they're going to call the president's office, and we want to avoid that. So I think sharing that and letting people know up front, like, I don't expect you to come back with 100 prospect cards. I don't expect you to come back with a bunch of people who are really interested in setting up a campus visit. I just expect you to be there so that I'm not asked why we weren't there later on. I think that then just makes people at least understand why they're there, and maybe not feel as bad about the time wasting.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't agree with that more. And I think a big part of the admissions problem is communication, and understanding what the institution's goals are probably a big part of a big disconnect to a lot of folks. I mean, it's just that's going to be what is causing a lot of the frustration, is just the lack of communication for that instance specifically. Because if you're an admissions counselor and and you think you're going to this fair and you think you're wasting your time, but if your boss listens to you and says and explains the real goal associated with it, now it reframes why you're there, and you understand it a little bit better. And let's be honest, high school fairs are a lot better than they were 5-10 years ago, because we have smartphones. You play Angry Birds, you can use your time. It's fine, no big deal. Words with Friends was really popular a couple years ago, probably a good way to use your time. All kidding aside, one of the main reasons why a lot of people like admissions is also the travel too. If you think about, you get to go to places you wouldn't normally get to go to. I mean, every time I traveled to Cleveland for the Cleveland National College Fair, I'd get to go to an Indians game because it was in the spring and the season had started. It's making the most of that too.
I agree, and I think again, from the director standpoint, I think it's important for us to have reasonable expectations for what counselors can do while they're on the road. I think that's probably a big source of frustration. Some counselors are asked to spend all day at schools and at fairs, and then spend their whole night in the hotel entering recruit card data or reading applications to stay up with the things from back in the office. And is that a reasonable expectation? And if it's not, I think that's where management has to kind of take a look at themselves.
Yep, absolutely. That's a good point. And I think um, the only kind of, if I'm playing devil's advocate here with that position, is what happens when the workload starts to back up. There aren't enough hours in the day. If a counselor, if they're not entering their inquiry cards because they get back to the hotel and they're resting, they're not reading all their applications because they're busy with students all day. And that starts a much bigger conversation about efficiency and use of resources. And let's talk about that for a minute. What do you do, and how do you prioritize those things?
Well, I think that's really an issue that management needs to address, because the fact is the amount of time in the day is finite. And as a director, I can either have realistic expectations and support my team in those expectations, or I could have unrealistic ones, which is going to lead to people crying and looking for other jobs. And that second approach does not get any more done. It doesn't add hours to their day. It just creates more problems and resentment. Probably leads to less productivity. Probably leads to them being much grumpier at the fairs, which then counteracts the whole point for them to be on the road. One issue that I faced when I first came into the position that I have now was the issue of the recruiters being asked to enter the recruit card data while they were on the road, and they had these quotas that they were supposed to reach, and it literally had people like calling in tears other people in the office saying, I can't get all this done. And I just said, their time on the road, their time in front of people and talking to people is much more valuable to me than their time entering data. So I just hired more student workers in my office and said, bring the cards back and the student workers will enter it when you get back. It did require some resources that I had to dedicate to that, but to me, it was important enough to do. So I think it's, something that is a director level decision, but you have to decide what are your priorities and really what is the best use of your resources.
Great. I hope that folks that are viewing the show kind of take those suggestions to heart and maybe make some changes for the good that they might not have been able to make before or thought of before. Just a reminder before we move on, we are seeing some pretty good activity on the Admissions Live hashtag, and we're monitoring that. We're going to keep mentioning those as we go. So if you have any thoughts or any input on any of the problems that we've tackled so far, hopefully you can provide us with some input. Our next topic that we wanted to discuss, and this is both our favorite topic to talk about, is helicopter parents. When you look at admissions problems, a lot of the posts that are on there have to do with parents. Even as close as yesterday was when a mom calls and says you're missing out on their rejected kid, and they post a funny picture of a person basically being like, "Meh, I don't care." And again, they're funny. They make you laugh because you do encounter that on a day-to-day basis. But how do you handle helicopter parents? What's the best approach to dealing with parents who are more and more involved because they are the ones making the investment? We just completed a research study on parents, and we're doing that analysis soon. But biggest issue across the board is affordability and cost. So they want to be treated like this is a $40,000 investment or whatever they're paying to go to your school. So what do we do to deal with helicopter parents?
I have a small confession to make. Helicopter parents are why I left teaching for higher ed. Really, but they are still in higher ed. I'm just not dealing with them hounding me about their children's grades and why I didn't give them credit for their homework that they turned in late. But I think that dealing with parents, I think there are two key things. One is I think we do need to remind ourselves that the parents, even when they do things that annoy us or we find are not productive, they really are doing it out of the sense of trying to help their student. They're really, their heart is in the right place, even if we may disagree with their tactics. But I think the other thing that's really important is to remember that you can't control the behaviors of others. You can only control the behavior of yourself. And again, as a director, it's important for me to communicate with my staff that I have their back when it comes to to parents. They know that they should not hesitate to transfer a parent to me if it's kind of ratcheting up, because we've had the conversations about how sometimes their demeanor changes when they're suddenly talking to the quote person in charge. And that the other thing is that, I'm going to stick up for them, and I'm not going to, kind of jump down their throats if a parent calls and says, well, your recruiter said this, or your recruiter, was rude. I'm going to, try to smooth their feathers, but then I'm not going to, march down to their cubicle and jump their case over that. So I think it's really important with parents to kind of have a team approach and to support each other, and just to, again, remind yourselves that the parents are trying to help their student, even if that's not the outcome. That's what they're trying to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And actually, Laura has a great tweet on the Admissions Live hashtag where she actually refers to them as now stealth parents, because they fly under the radar until financial aid arrives, and then you have to watch out. So I mean, and I couldn't have said it better. Knowing that your supervisor has your back, as long as you're handling yourself and handling your business as best you can, your boss should have your back. And if the parent is being unreasonable, then it's just like working anywhere. Whatever industry you're working in, there's going to be customers, if you want to call the parents customers, that do have unrealistic expectations, and they do have very high demands. And the reality is that they are making a pretty large investment of their time and resources in the college search. So you do have to be respectful. But again, you don't want to overextend. Going back to talking about managing resources, you don't want to spend too much time on folks that you're not going to be able to make happy no matter what you do. I used to say that there were always those families that came to open house that were looking for reasons to not attend your school, and they're going to find it no matter what it is, and whether it's the Snickers wrapper on the sidewalk during the tour or the rude admissions counselor, they're going to find something.
Yes, one of my favorite responses in the open house evaluation is that we could have made the weather better. That one, I love that. I love that one. And I tell my staff, we can't be everything to everybody, and so there are going to be some people who come and they're not happy, and we could give them free tuition for 4 years and no room and board and all the kids' books, and they'd still have a problem with something like, oh, but you aren't going to provide them with their bedding. So you're right, that you can't make everybody happy. And I think another thing too is to remember that sometimes parents are dealing with some bad advice and bad information. And sometimes if we just really explain like what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we do it, even on my campus, I'll have faculty members or staff members who will say, well, my kid has gotten this from this other school and they haven't gotten it from you. And then when I explain to them, what our process is and how it works, they go, oh, okay. Well, I understand. Okay, thanks. I'll look for that, invite to open house coming next month. So I think sometimes just informing people about the process, and especially how it works at your school, because it's different at your school than other schools. Sometimes that can talk them off that ledge immediately.
Absolutely. I mean, and at the end of the day, whether you're a director of admission or a associate director or whatever, you're an admissions counselor at the very end, and your job is to help and support and inform. And as long as you're doing those things, then your boss should have your back. And if they don't, then again, that's a boss issue, not a higher ed issue, not an admissions issue. So it's important to draw that distinction.
Definitely.
So we're getting close to time, but I want to make sure we cover this topic, and this is weekend visits, having to cover weekend visits and feeling like you never really get a day off. And this is something that I see a lot on the Admissions Problems Tumblr, and I just hear a lot from my colleagues and former colleagues at various institutions. It's tough, having to cover college fairs all week and then having to go do open house setup on a Saturday and go to open house on Sunday. So how do you handle that with the feeling of weekend visits, having to cover weekend visits and having to be kind of on all the time?
Well, one thing is we try to be very, very upfront about this just in the interview process, as to how much time they're going to spend on the road. on the evenings, on the weekends, working. But I also make it clear to them that I don't expect them to work 24 hours a day, and that I will give them time off in return for that time, at night fairs or on the weekends. While they're on the road, if they're doing a lot of night fairs, then I say, take 3 hours in the afternoon and take a nap, go shopping, go see a movie, just hang out. Don't feel like you have to work your normal work day plus that night fair. Kind of balance it out and adjust your day to make up for that too.
Now, just knowing people that work at institutions that are encouraged to do that as well, given a day off or a day work, that sort of stuff, there's still oftentimes morale issues. So what else can leadership do?
Well, I think it's really important for leadership to assess what staff are actually needed at an event. Can you run your open house with just your student ambassadors and maybe two staff members instead of the entire staff? And then you can rotate so that the first open house, counselor A and B are present, and then the next one it's C and D, so that they're not all there. Especially if you look around and see that they're spending most of the day just sitting around, that's going to build resentment really quickly. So look at what you're doing and the time that people are really spending, and how can you maybe realign staff duties so that you can maybe make some trade-offs and not everybody is sitting there feeling like it's a complete waste of their time.
I know a lot of people that would probably want to come work at Marshall right about now, hearing that.
But we do have an opening. It's listed on Marshall's website, marshall.edu/human-resources, if anybody's interested in coming to work with my crazy crew.
Crazy crew, awesome. So I guess, you've given we've talked a lot about leadership roles and advice to those folks, but what about the road warriors, the people that are, on the ground, the people that are tweeting to admissions problems, and the people who are hopefully following us on the Admissions Live hashtag and watching the video right now? What advice would you give to them?
Well, I think they really need to approach their boss with these issues, with information. Hopefully their boss is asking them about these things, and encouraging them to bring problems to them. But if they're not, then I think those counselors need to take that information to their boss, respectfully, but take it to them. And if they can offer possible solutions along with the problem, that makes it even better for somebody in my position. There are times I don't even know something's an issue, but if one of my recruiters comes to me and says, this college fair, man, it's bad, and I have to drive 4 hours to get there, and the hotel is crap, and I only get 5 recruit cards, and I've been there 3 years in a row, and it's not getting any better. But I talked to some school counselors in the area, and they really think that if I just came to the school during the day, I'd get a lot better response. That makes it a no-brainer for me. I'm like, okay, do it. So if you're only taking the issues, and I think that's still important for the bosses to be aware of the issues, but if you're only taking the issue, you're not going to get as quick, I think, of a response, because then you've got to go back and you've got to think about it, and you've got to look at the data, and you've got to think about the implications. But if somebody comes to you and says, here's an issue and here's a way that I think we could address it, it makes it really easy for the boss to say, okay, let's give it a shot.
I can't agree with that more. And I think that's the foundation of this whole conversation. It's one thing to complain about a problem. It's another thing to complain about that problem on a public forum like a Tumblr account or a Twitter account. But the better approach is to bring that concern to your supervisor with a tangible solution. Look at the passive aggressive behavior of a Twitter account like Admissions Props. You can create an account, you can post things to be funny, get close to 5,000 followers, but when given the opportunity to be a part of a dialogue where you're talking about tangible solutions, nowhere to be found. So it's ultimately, if you don't bring any solutions to your boss, they probably don't even know there's a problem, and won't understand won't be able to look at alternatives to what you're trying to solve.
Exactly. I really can't add anything to that, because that was just perfectly stated.
Thanks. I tried.
You're welcome.
I'm on the human resources site. I'm just kidding. Just a quick plug. We do have free passes to the .edu Guru Summit on March 27th. Folks who are tweeting to us will automatically be entered to win free passes to that. There's also a 20% off offer for Higheredlive viewers. We're going to tweet out the link and the coupon code for that to use. Just enter 20 Higheredlive at checkout and you'll receive 20% off. But if you have any tweets that you want to share and talk about, we have a couple of minutes, not a whole lot, but feel free to throw those out there and we'll try to get to those before the end of the show. So while folks are hopefully tweeting, and maybe if we have a couple of minutes at the end, I don't think we're going to, though, because we're running out of time. But in closing, can you give us some closing thoughts about admissions problems and the hashtag admission probs and how we as an industry might be able to continue to address these problems and hopefully keep this dialogue going after the show?
Sure. I think there's a real reason that the admissions problem blog has struck such a chord with so many of us in this profession. We're working in a field that demands that we work beyond our normal workday and our work week, and it doesn't pay a whole lot, and it requires us to be away from home for weeks at a time. And at the same time, we're expected to always be, positive, and, have that happy face on. And it's draining. It's exhausting, and we don't always feel that we're appreciated, and it helps to feel like we're not alone in this world of admissions. So when we see a post on that Tumblr that we relate to, it makes us laugh and it makes us feel better about, our challenges. And there's certainly a time and place for all of that, but I think it's important for us to remember that all of this stuff isn't just happening to us, and we do have the power to change it. Now we have to work together to do that. We have to communicate. We have to communicate within our offices and outside of our offices. And we need to communicate about solutions as much as we do about the problems. So if we commit to asking each other questions, when we're at a college fair, hey, is there anything cool that your office does that's a little bit different that's, really working for you? And then communicating with the students and the parents and the high school and independent counselors and informing them, in a positive and a constructive way, I think that will really start to eliminate some of these areas that are frequently frustrating for us.
I could not have said that better myself. Out of curiosity, I actually clicked on the admissions probs hashtag to see if there were any recent posts that we didn't already cover, and it honestly looked like we covered most of them. So Beth, congratulations. We have solved all of the problems in the admissions industry as long as everybody does what we tell them to do.
Awesome. I'll start taking commission checks. People can mail them to me directly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if you have any tips to share in the Twitter sphere or questions for Beth or myself, I want to keep this conversation going. Please use the Admissions Live hashtag, hashtag Admissions Live. We also coined the phrase Admissions Solutions, which is a little long for a hashtag. Uses up about half your tweet, but it's pretty good. So please feel free to keep the conversation going after the show with us as well. So I want to thank Beth again for joining me and tackling admissions problems during the show tonight. It's been a blast, great conversation as usual. I look forward to continuing this conversation on Twitter and at conferences this spring and summer. I know I'll be at a bunch. I'm not sure how many you'll be at, Beth, but we're going to be hopefully spending some time at those. And as always, you can watch more shows from Admissions Pros on the Admissions Live archive located at higheredlive.com. Thanks to everyone who tuned in, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Thank you. It was great.